Hey there, and welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going deep into a question, kind of unsettling actually, how societies grapple with the truth
Yeah,
during major crises. Like when a natural disaster hits,
right.
a pandemic sweeps the globe,
Mm.
or any event that throws everything into chaos.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And you've sent over some really compelling excerpts from this document. It's
Oh,
called
yeah.
Crisis and Truth: How Societies Deal with the Truth in Times of Disaster.
I know, right? The title just grabs you.
It
It
does.
starts off strong, talking about information as this lifeline
Yeah,
during a crisis.
which makes sense, right? When you think about it, accurate, timely information, it's absolutely crucial for people to prepare well, react safely, and then ultimately recover.
Totally. I mean, without that flow of good information, it'd be like stumbling in the dark.
Exactly.
But, and this is where it gets really interesting, it doesn't just talk about good information.
Right.
It digs into the opposite, the dangers of misinformation.
And it's not just that it's bad, you
Mhm.
know? What's striking is how the document looks at the
Mhm.
psychology of why it's so powerful, especially in a crisis.
Okay, unpack that a bit. What do you mean?
Well, our brains, they latch onto sensational stuff, especially when we're stressed out. It's survival, right?
Yeah.
You know our ancestors. They
Mhm.
paid attention to threats. The document even mentions studies. Misinformation, especially if it makes you afraid, it spreads faster
Really?
than just neutral facts. And
Mm.
crises, perfect for that.
So it's like our own biology is working against us at the worst time.
Mm.
And I remember the early days of COVID, which the document uses as a case study.
Oh, for good reason.
It felt like every hour there was a new theory, a new supposed cure all over the place online.
Exactly. And that wasn't just confusing, it had consequences. People were making bad health choices based on rumors, hoarding things. It showed how fast misinformation
Yeah.
can snowball in a crisis and lead to bad actions.
Okay, so we've got information that's crucial, but misinformation spreads like wildfire. That brings us to another theme. Who controls the narrative
Yeah.
during these critical moments?
This is where it gets complex. Because on one hand, you need transparency. People need to trust they're getting the full story from their leaders.
Especially during a disaster.
Exactly. But the document also points out how governments and institutions,
Mm.
they've opted for limited transparency in the past.
Really?
During disasters, yeah. They might control information or even withhold things,
Wow.
and their reasons. Often it's well-intentioned. They want to prevent panic, keep order, and make sure there's a sense of security.
Which, on the surface, makes sense.
Right.
But is it ever effective in the long run?
That's the question. And the document doesn't shy away from the downsides. Because when people sense a cover-up, even if it's meant well, trust just evaporates.
And once it's gone, good luck getting it back.
Precisely. Which brings us to Chernobyl in 1986, a chilling example in the document.
Right, yeah.
Soviet officials, they tried to downplay how bad it was at first, but the truth finds a way out, right?
And when it did, with Chernobyl, the consequences were just devastating.
Absolutely. It's like a textbook example.
Yeah.
How damaging a lack of transparency is,
Yeah.
especially during a crisis. Like the document says, honesty, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
It's the best policy in the end. Builds resilience.
Because when you're dealing with a disaster, you don't need people doubting every word.
Exactly.
So that takes us to the media, right? They're our main source of information.
Yeah, they're key players in this whole thing, crisis and truth.
It's true. You turn on the TV, you go online,
Right.
you're looking to journalists to make sense of what's happening.
Absolutely. They have a lot of power, and ideally, they want to get it right, give accurate reporting, timely reporting.
Yeah.
But the document, it also gets real about the pressures they're under.
Yeah.
The 2147 news cycle always having to be first.
Right.
It can be tough to be accurate and nuanced sometimes.
And then there's sensationalism, right? And political agendas, which the document calls out. It's like, even with good intentions, those things can twist the information.
Yeah.
And that influences how people see the whole crisis.
It's a tough balance. Report quickly, get attention, but still,
Yeah.
keep your integrity.
Right.
That's where media literacy comes in, especially during a crisis.
So true.
We have to be smart, question what we're seeing and hearing,
Absolutely.
get different perspectives.
Okay, so then there's social media,
Oh, yeah.
the wild card in all of this.
It's true, though. It can be amazing for connecting with people, getting updates.
Like in that earthquake and tsunami in Japan, the document talks about that.
Right. People were using Twitter, Facebook to find people they'd lost track of.
Wow.
Coordinating help, sharing important stuff when other communication was down,
Right.
showed how good it could be in a crisis.
But anyone can post anything.
Exactly. True or not doesn't matter. And in a crisis, when everyone's on edge,
Oh, it's dangerous.
it's that double-edged sword the document talks about. Misinformation, it thrives in that environment.
Yeah.
It plays on our fears, and we want to believe stuff that fits our existing ideas, so we don't always question it.
So we've got heightened emotions. We need answers.
Right.
And then, bam, we're scrolling through tons of information, some true, some not.
It's overwhelming.
How can you even tell the difference?
And that's where it gets dangerous, the document argues.
Okay.
Bad decisions, more panic,
Yeah.
less trust.
Yeah.
It can even mess up recovery work. Remember the toilet paper thing?
Oh, totally. People freaking out over toilet paper.
Exactly. And that's a funny example. The document goes into more serious stuff.
Oh, right.
Like public health, vaccine hesitancy during a pandemic. That's serious.
Yeah, life or death.
Right.
It really makes you realize how high the stakes are when we're talking about truth during a crisis.
For sure.
So where does that leave us? Misinformation everywhere? Even the news isn't perfect?
Right.
What can we do? How do we navigate this? It's like we need superpowers or something.
Right.
Like a truth detector.
That would be something. But until then, the document, it points to a few strategies. They really stand out after everything we've talked about.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the antidote to all this misinformation chaos?
Well, it starts with like healthy skepticism, Not being cynical, but being willing to question.
Right.
Especially if something makes you feel a really strong way.
So like, don't just hit share on every crazy headline.
Exactly. Like, who's saying this? Why?
I hear you, yeah.
And that leads to the next thing. Mix up your information diet.
That's a good way to put it.
If all you hear is stuff you already agree with,
Right.
you're not getting the full picture.
It's like that saying, right? If everyone in the room agrees with you, someone's not thinking.
Exactly. The document, it really pushes for getting a range of views.
Even ones we don't want.
Even then.
Yeah.
That's where you learn, get a better understanding of what's going on.
It takes effort, though.
It does.
It's so easy to just stay in our little bubbles, especially in a crisis.
It's true. We want comfort.
Right.
But the document's point is staying informed, it's not just good for us personally.
It's for everyone.
Yeah, it's how society stays healthy as a whole.
So societies that prioritize truth, critical thinking, open discussion.
Those are the ones that survive the tough times.
It's like truth makes us stronger, a defense against being manipulated.
Well said. And it reminds us this isn't just on governments or whoever, it's on each of us. We choose what we listen to, what we spread.
Yeah, we're all part of this.
We have to actively look for the truth, even when it's tough.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. And on that note, this deep dive is coming to an end.
It is, but it feels like just the start of the conversation.
It does.
And that's how it should be. These are big questions.
They really are.
No easy answers.
Okay, so for everyone listening, one last thing to think about.
Okay.
Talked about misinformation being media literate.
Mm-hmm.
But what about empathy? Like really trying to understand